June 25th, 2137, Advanced Base, Proxima Centauri. BI set foot on the red sands of Proxima Centauri B for the first time, heart pounding, the visor of my helmet fogged with my own breath. The heat rising from the surface seemed to melt me from the inside, and the landscape was something I could never have imagined, even in my worst nightmares. I saw mountains that looked like jagged teeth, pointing toward a greenish-white sky. "Welcome to hell," I muttered to myself. This wasn't a colonization mission. It was a war sentence, and we all knew it. Captain Elias Kane appeared in front of me, his cold, calculating gaze fixed on the horizon. He never spoke an unnecessary word. When he spoke, each of us knew there was a reason. "We're in hostile territory, soldiers. The Jari won't give up an inch without a fight." I looked around at the squad, our faces hidden behind visors, but the fear was almost palpable. We knew what lay ahead: blood, screams, and the haunting echo of the Jari's final resistance. The first time I saw a Jari, the shock nearly took my breath away. They were tall, slender, with skin like metallic scales, and yellow eyes that seemed to pierce into your soul. When they attacked us, it was like thunder, swift, ruthless, like a storm of blades. We didn't even have time to react. A scream tore through the air as a soldier beside me was ripped in half by an energy spear. My heart pounded, but I had to hold firm. Between the chaos of attacks and Kane's brutal orders, Dr. Lyra Oshima, the scientist, was an absurd contrast. She tried somehow to establish communication with those monsters. I saw her, alone, clutching a translation device that seemed useless as the Jari advanced mercilessly. "They have a culture, a history we don't understand," she kept repeating, trying to convince me that maybe there was a chance for peace. I just laughed. For me, that was impossible. Each incursion felt like an eternity. In the silence between attacks, the only sound was the distant echo of the Jari patrolling the darkness. I never felt safe, not even for a second. There was always tension in the air, as if they could appear at any moment, emerging from the shadows. The light from our flashlights flickered, casting shadows that seemed to move on their own. We felt the vibrations of their steps even before seeing them. In one of the most brutal attacks, the Jari broke through our defensive line. I heard the screams of my comrades, the hum of energy weapons, and the thud of bodies hitting the ground. A Jari charged at me, its spear glowing with deadly energy. I smelled ozone, a sudden cold that cut me like a blade. I fired, but the creature was too fast. It dodged and struck me with the force of a storm. I hit the ground, my visor cracked, the air escaping my lungs. The last thing I remember before blacking out was Kane's voice, shouting orders and rallying the soldiers. But something was different. Amid the battle, a roar echoed, something I had never heard before. The very ground seemed to respond. Later, Lyra would tell me it was a sort of war chant of the Jari, a ritual to protect their ancestral land. They weren't just fighting us, they were defending something they considered sacred, and for some reason, that made me tremble even more. The last time I saw Dr. Lyra Oshima alive, she was surrounded by the unknown, her expression determined but filled with uncertainty. She wouldn't abandon that cursed translation device, even when the Jari were almost upon us. Kane was shouting for us to fall back, but she couldn't hear him, or maybe she didn't want to. She was obsessed with trying to understand the Jari, as if she could find some logic amidst that hell. "Lyra, get out of there, damn it!" I shouted as the energy weapons buzzed around us. But she didn't respond. She stared fixedly at the approaching Jari, as if waiting for a sign, a response, something to justify her insane quest. Then I saw the glistening spear of one of the Jari warriors rise above her. There was nothing I could do. Everything seemed to move in slow motion, as if time itself had decided to prolong that moment. When the spear came down, the sound was muffled, as if the whole world had gone silent for a second. She fell to the ground without a sound, the translation device slipping from her hands and rolling over the red, dusty ground. The impact of her death was a harder blow than any Jari attack. Something inside me shattered at that moment, and as I looked at Lyra's lifeless face, I felt a lump in my throat. I knew in that instant that we had lost any chance of peace. Kane didn't hesitate. He raised his arm and ordered a full attack. "We're not waiting a second longer. Wipe out these monsters." The roar of rage in his voice reverberated through us all, igniting a fury that consumed us completely. Lyra was dead, and with her, any hope of dialogue. Kane didn't want to understand. He wanted revenge. And so did we all. What followed was a massacre. Our energy weapons lit up the sky as we advanced on the Jari. The smell of ozone and burnt metal filled the air, and screams echoed in the dark night of Proxima Centauri b. I felt each heavy step, the weight of Lyra's death haunting me, but nothing else mattered. I fired without thinking, without hesitation, driven only by the desire to destroy everything in my path. It was the only thing that kept despair at bay. For some reason, the Jari didn't retreat. They continued, even against our superior force. Each one of them fell defending the same piece of ground, as if that land were more precious than life itself. Kane was relentless, pushing forward and knocking down anyone in his way. But even he seemed disturbed by the Jari's stubbornness. It was as if they knew death wasn't the end, that there was something beyond that we couldn't understand. Lyra's blood still stained the ground when we regrouped. Her translation device was broken, but it still emitted a faint glow, as if trying to capture one last message. I picked it up, dirty and cracked, and for a moment, wondered what she would see if she were here. "This is a never-ending fight," I whispered. But I knew the worst was yet to come. The last remnants of the Jari were cornered, huddled in a hidden cave deep within a canyon. Kane marched in front, resolute, while the rest of us followed with weapons ready, exhausted, but determined to end their resistance once and for all. I held Lyra's broken translation device, a remnant of her attempt at peace. Something gnawed at me, but I didn't know what. It was like a shadow following me, a buried secret insisting on being revealed. As we entered the cave, a faint light pulsed at the end. I noticed Lyra's device was reacting to that energy, blinking as if it were trying to communicate. That was impossible, I thought, but something urged me to continue. Kane cast me a look of contempt, but allowed me to approach. "Something's wrong here," I murmured, clutching the device that began emitting static sounds, fragments of words that sounded like whispers. Suddenly, a voice emerged, clear and terrifying. "You are them?" That phrase echoed deep in my mind like a curse. What?" I asked, but the device kept repeating that unsettling message. Kane advanced, impatient, trying to ignore it, but I couldn't take my eyes off the Jari in front of us. They weren't attacking us. They were standing still, watching us with their bright yellow eyes, and an expression that seemed familiar. As if, in some impossible way, they recognized us. Suddenly, the device emitted a sequence of holographic images. I saw Earth, our Earth, ravaged, swallowed by deserts and toxic oceans. Then, a series of humanoid figures, but strangely familiar, with scaly skin, empty gazes, and features resembling ours. "My God," I whispered, feeling a chill run down my spine. The Jari were descendants of humans. We were the invaders of a planet that, thousands of years ago, our own ancestors had abandoned. Kane staggered back, his face pale with shock, but I knew he wouldn't change his mind. He would never accept that everything we had fought for was actually the destruction of our own descendants. Without a word, he raised his weapon to a wounded Jari. "There's no turning back," he muttered, but before he could fire, the Jari in unison let out an ancestral scream, and an intense light exploded from the cave. The light engulfed us, and in that instant, memories that weren't mine flooded my mind. I saw the departure from Earth, the suffering of the humans who remained, and the slow transformations that adapted them to the new environment of Proxima Centauri b. The Jari were us. They were defending not just their planet, but the last legacy of a forgotten humanity. I fell to my knees as the light faded, leaving a deep, silent darkness. Lyra's device stopped working forever, and, in that instant, the truth vanished with it. With the truth buried in that cave, Kane ordered the extermination to continue. He preferred to erase that history, rather than live with the burden of knowing we were, in fact, the invaders of our own lost lineage. And so, the last Jari, the last fragments of a forgotten Earth, were silenced, as we, blinded by conquest, destroyed what was left of our own origin. And so, we won a war that, deep down, we should never have started.